Boradar and Christiwi Cymru, and welcome to Wales. Now today I'm taking you all to a little village called Llangernyw, which is smack bang in the middle of the Llangernyw mountain range to the east and Eryri to the west. This landscape and its villages are still dominated by the Welsh language. It's still the first and most spoken language amongst the people that live here. Culturally, it's still very much dominated by shoots, hunts, as well as storytelling. These people are passed down from generation to generation the history, the mythology and folklore that dominate the landscape they call home. And one story I would like to tell you is about the Angelystor, and in English, it is known as the Angel of Death. Now the setting of the story is within St. Degain's itself, the graveyard and the church at the centre of Llangernyw. Now it's safe to say that the worshippers over the generations have most likely witnessed the wars of independence for the Welsh going through the Great Plague and all the way into the English Civil War and the anarchy that was caused by that conflict. The people have been worshipping in this church for generations and generations. It's a very historical building. But the history of those bricks and mortar that have created that church are heavily overshadowed by the yew tree that looms over it in its graveyard. There has been much debate on how old it is, but it has been said that it is 4,500 years old. Now put this into perspective. If that is true, then when this tree was first coming up from the ground, it was born at the time when mammoths were becoming extinct, when the pyramids of Giza were being built, and Stonehenge itself was being erected in the south. The history of what this tree has seen predates a lot of the great history we have on this island. Now this yew tree stands at 35 feet tall and dominates much of the gravestones east of the church itself. But before Christianity reached the shores of the UK and the first stones being placed down to build the foundations of St. Degain's, yew trees were seen as sacred locations to our ancient pagan ancestors. Yew trees held an emotional connection to them. They were areas of worship, religious belief, spiritual belief, and meeting points. The yew tree itself was seen by the pagans as a symbol of death and rebirth. And the needles and the berries itself are poisonous in nature. That kind of reflects the belief that the pagans held. Throughout Britain, churches were being built up and cementing upon the ground of once sacred and holy sites to our pagan ancestors. One reason this happened was most likely because they wanted to draw people away from the old superstitious beliefs into the new Church of Rome and bring them closer into the bosom of Christ. And as this was happening, new beliefs were springing up about these trees. Yew trees were seen as areas of death and rebirth, but the Christians put a new spin on it. They started seeing them as locations of death and resurrection. And as this went on, yew trees then started to become areas of superstitious beliefs, and hollow grounds where people used to connect to their gods became places where you would not go. Christianity has definitely cemented its new claim upon this land, and St. Degain's is now the new dominating church of the people here. And as time went on, superstitions and traditions of folklore about yew trees started to change. In fact, because most yew trees were in graveyards, people believed they were planted there because the roots go into the eyes of the dead and will hold them there into the day of judgment, so that no dead will rise before God himself claims them to be. So the location of St. Degain's for thousands of years has held sacred religious belief for people. And even today, if you're Christian, pagan, Sikh, Hindu, or have no religious belief at all, you will definitely find some sort of emotional connection to this land. But I am not here for a pilgrimage. I'm here to tell a ghost story. And this is where the Llangernyw comes into play. Now, the Llangernyw in English, it is known as the Angel of Death, but translated, it is known as the Counting Angel. And the folklore and the mythology and the stories that are passed down by the villagers that live here say that on the 31st of October, when we celebrate Halloween, All Saints' Eve, or Samhain, that the churchyard stays empty, locked, and people avoid it. The pub stays quiet, and singing and dancing, which is quite common on festive celebrations, are not much to be heard. The legend has it is that the Llangernyw is said to speak out the words of the dead to come. Once those words are spoken and the names are pronounced a year from when that is said, that unfortunate soul will meet its end. Now, this story is common folklore to Llangernyw and the surrounding villages of this location. And for hundreds of years, this story has been passed down from generation to generation. But in the 18th century, there was a man called Angelystor Roberts who set up a shop in Llangernyw. He was a tailor, a merchant, very wealthy, very respected, but also known as a bit of a piss taker. On the 31st of October, on All Saints' Eve, he came into the pub and noticed everybody was drinking quite conservatively. There was not much singing, the rowdiness was down, and the place was quiet. And this gained his curiosity. He started to joke, started to sing, started to dance, but nobody would join in. So he sat down and asked who died. One man came to him and said, "We don't know yet." "You don't know yet," he replied. And this is when the legend was recited to him, as well as many people before and many people after. But Angelystor Roberts, again, as I said, he was a bit of a piss taker and greeted this story with mockery. But as he was mocking, no one was laughing with him. One man, the blacksmith, challenged him to go to the yew tree, sit there throughout the night, and come to us in the morning and tell us that it is something to be mocked. Angelystor Roberts was not a man to turn down a challenge. He took himself an ale, a bit of bread and cheese, and went into the graveyard itself. And he sat in that graveyard, drinking down his ale, eating his cheese, and just laughing. But as the night drew in, it was getting very cold. There was not much light. Remember, this was the 18th century. Light pollution, electric lights were nothing. Most places were lit only by candlelight. And as he was sitting in that yew tree, pondering all the stories that he was told, he started to become very wary. And as the hour before midnight struck, he started to hear voices. Bi Rafain an enwad an vero, keen bohin. Bi Rafain an enwad an vero, keen bohin. Now in English, it's simply translated into "these are the names that will soon be dead." And unfortunately for Art Roberts, the name that lingered in his mind most throughout that night was his own. Robert started to scream into the night, "It is not my time. I am not going, and this fear in thee will not take me." And throughout the rest of the year, Roberts became very isolated, rarely ventured out of his house, and only saw people on business and religious sermons. Next year, on the 31st of October, he was found dead and buried in the graveyard of St. Llangernyw. This is not the only story connected to the Llangernyw. Throughout the years, people have heard the names of their loved ones and have witnessed them dangling on the gallows a year later. Others have heard their names and have perished within the next year. And these stories have been connected all the way into deaths in this village, well into the 60s. And it truly is a harrowing and chilling story to tell, but it's a part of the folklore, the history and the mythology of the people that live here. So being a part of the cultural significance of storytelling in Wales, if you do come here, do respect the story. Don't come to mock or jilt. Come to listen and learn. If you do not believe in ghosts, that's fine, that's your right to do so. But for some people that still live here, it's as much a part of their belief as the Christian church itself. But it is truly a beautiful location. And the surrounding woodland walks is definitely recommended. But throughout Wales, areas of legend, myth and mythology are still there for you to find. So go out walking, go out adventuring, learn these stories, because they're much a part of our past as any. So I bid you hwyl fawr from Wales and safe travels. And if you come here on the 31st of October, I pray that you do not hear your name. Safe travels from Wales.